decision makers, but it also, of course, comes at a very decisive time for the European continent, as we have the conflict between the United States and Iran and the massive effects that it has on the global economy, on the European economy, and it comes just hours before an informal European Council meeting, António Costa. So we're very happy to have you here. And I think we need to dive right into it. How much of a threat do you think this conflict that goes on right now, with Iran blockading the Strait of Hormuz, the United States blockading Iran's blockade, energy stuck, natural gas stuck, how much of a threat is that to the citizens of Europe?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. It's a great pleasure to share the stage with my dear friends, Κυριάκου Mητσοτάκη. And of course, we are living a very challenging moment. And this war is, first of all, a challenge for the international law. And it's more than ever important to uphold international law, because the alternative of international law is just the chaos. And we need to avoid the chaos. The second threat in the global economic impact of this war. And it's clear that the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz and the attacks against civilian facilities, namely in the essential for energy producing or storage, is a huge risk for our global economy. And now that's the reason, because since the very beginning, the European Union is calling, first of all, everybody to de-escalate, to restrain, to obtain a ceasefire, not a short ceasefire, but a latest ceasefire, and in order to give place for diplomacy, to address the deep issues, the nuclear issues, because never ever Iran can have a nuclear capacity, to address also...
A nuclear weapon, you mean?
The nuclear weapon, yes. We need to address also we need to control the ballistic missiles, and we need to ensure that Iran stop to support their proxies who are a threat for their neighbors, for our countries, and also to ensure the freedom of navigation. This is a key principle for the international law, and we need to respect and ensure this. And on the other side, we need to stop the war in Lebanon. President Aoun and his government has taken a historic decision to ban the armed activity of Hezbollah. And we need to support the Lebanon authorities to take effective control of their territory, to effectively disarm Hezbollah in order to ensure a peaceful situation in the Middle East. And this is our position, and we need to continue our diplomatic activity to pursue these different goals.
Prime Minister Mitsotakis, you very early on understood that the war in Iran was a serious threat to the economies of Europe. You already took measures to for instance, make sure that gasoline prices here in Greece don't go out of control. How big a threat is this specifically for Greece? Because we have the tourism season coming up. I saw, I think yesterday, that Lufthansa canceled 20,000 flights, the German national carrier. But then also in the field of agriculture, for instance, energy security.
I think we are faced with potentially a crisis of very, very significant proportions. It is a question of time. If the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz continues for a significant amount of time, we will have physical disruptions in the supply of crude oil and products. We will have significant increases in the prices of energy. We will have shortages in fertilizers, and we will most probably have a spike in inflation and a significant reduction in our growth rates. This will affect all European countries. Greece may be doing better than most European countries these days, but we are not immune to a crisis of this magnitude. So I would agree with Antonio that the #1 priority is to get to a permanent ceasefire that will essentially return us to the status quo before the war, because the Strait of Hormuz was open. We are a leading maritime nation. We cannot accept the notion that an open waterway will be subject to any tolls or any payment
you have a gigantic merchant fleet. I mean, Greece is one of the most important
This is something which would set a catastrophic precedent. So we need to put all our efforts in supporting a diplomatic solution. But we also need to be ready, and this will be discussed tomorrow, for a possible worst-case scenario. We saw what happened during the Ukraine war. We saw how dependent we were on Russian gas. And I think that this crisis is also another opportunity to recalibrate our strategy regarding strategic autonomy and our resilience on European energy. Because we have placed a lot of emphasis, and we're leaders in decarbonization, but this cannot be the only goal. Security of supply, sustainability of our industry needs to be right up there in terms of our priorities. We talk a lot about reducing the amount of CO2 we emit. We don't talk about the availability of jet fuel. I mean, this is a real issue these days. So I would urge us all, and we've had these discussions, to be much more pragmatic and to have a plan B in place in case this crisis is prolonged, because the financial impact is going to be significant. And no member state can support our societies indefinitely without some sort of European support.
How bad can a worst case be? Because I saw that the EU Energy Commissioner said it's going to be a very tough summer for Europe. What are you bracing for? What are your plannings for the worst case scenario? Also, of course, putting together all European Union nations.
But we experienced last year the impact of two dramatic shortages. The first one after the COVID. Second, after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And we experienced the dramatic effect and impact in the inflation in our countries. And now we are facing a third shock. And the Commission presented today a package, a toolbox with several kinds of tools to be used by the member states in order to try to control the prices on energy. And we will discuss this tomorrow in the informal council, and I cannot anticipate now. But I think the main message that we should understand that we are an economic region that we are full importers of gas and oil. Then the only structural solution for Europe is to develop homegrown sources to produce energy. Renewables, nuclear, doesn't matter. We should be technological neutral, but we must produce our own energy. If not, we are always exposed to risks of disruption, or because Russian oil doesn't come anymore, or because we have a problem in the Strait of Hormuz, or we have a problem somewhere else. Then the only way to ensure our strategic autonomy, to be independent, is to invest more and more in our homegrown energy. And this is not only a matter of environment. First of all, now is a matter of security, of our own security, and that must be one of main priority.
And this is something that's important, Mr. Prime Minister, in many ways, because it's not just that European countries need to meet their energy demands. They need a lot more energy than they're using right now. And I think actually the Trump administration has understood that especially with artificial intelligence becoming bigger and bigger, there's going to be a lot more necessity for a lot more energy. And right now, Europe is already facing, in many countries, I wouldn't say an energy crisis, but it's certainly energy is not as easily available as it probably should be, especially if we look at Germany, we look at some other countries. What do you think is the way forward there to meet those?
First of all, let me use the Greek example, which is also quite similar to Portugal, as maybe a case study of an energy mix that actually works for Greek consumers. We took a decision 7 years ago to move away from coal, almost completely, primarily for environmental, but also for cost reasons, because coal is becoming very expensive when you add the CO2 emission costs, and move towards an energy mix where we rely on renewables and natural gas as baseload power. We're now one of the leading countries in terms of electricity production from renewables. You saw quite a few windmills on your way to Delphi, so the combination of wind, solar, and hydro allows us now to have significantly lower prices than many of our neighbors, and to turn Greece from a net importer of electricity into a net exporter of electricity. Of course, in order to export more and to import more when we need it, we need more grids. This is a challenge. The truth is, and I've been very blunt on this topic, that the European energy market is completely fragmented. We do not have a unified energy market in Europe. The countries that are producing cheap energy don't necessarily want to share it with others, and we need to overcome this blockage. But at the same time, what Antonio said is incredibly important. If we're going to import natural gas, and we will need to do so, let's make sure we do it from reliable partners. In Greece, we have placed a bet in turning Greece into an entry point for liquefied natural gas, primarily from the US, and to use what we call the vertical corridor to supply countries to our north, and to be also a provider of energy security. And my last point, we need to go big on nuclear. And I'm saying this without...
That was going to be another important question, I think. Do you feel that in the past years, and I want to ask you this as well, Mr. President, that the discussion about energy in Europe, when things were going great in all European countries, was too ideological?
It was completely... I mean, we've seen this at the Council. We lost years discussing the famous taxonomy question, and it was a moral discussion. We don't like nuclear because it's bad. We don't like natural gas because it's almost as bad as nuclear, although we all recognize it's much better than coal. But look at Germany now. We shut down its nuclear industry, lost the know-how, and is burning coal. Coal. And it will burn coal at least until 2036. It's wrong from an environmental point of view. It's wrong from a CO2 point of view. From an economic point of view, it doesn't make any sense. So I think when you look at the clean tech industry in Europe, where we can still be competitive, we need to double down on those industries where we can actually create homegrown strategic autonomy. And we need to do it in nuclear. And I'm speaking as a country that has no nuclear production, and it will take us a lot of time to discuss whether we will become a nuclear country. But when I wear my European hat, I fully recognize that we need to leave these ideological debates behind us. We need to be ruthlessly pragmatic, and we need to understand that nuclear will be part of the solution, and we'd better grow our own technology rather than import it again from the US or from from Korea or from any other country that has nuclear know-how.
Do you believe that's happening? Do you think that the discussion has moved beyond that? Because Germany still isn't going back to nuclear. They're still burning a lot of coal.
We have already overcome this phase. Now we accept in the taxonomy the principle of the technological neutrality, and each member state is free to choose their own energetic mix. The goal, we have a common goal to decarbonize our economy, but this is not also only about the production of energy. We need to invest more on grids to increase interconnections, but to have also smarter grids, because smarter grids is now a very important way to reduce the consumption, to have a more efficient use of energy, and we need to continue to invest to increase the efficiency of the use of energy.
I want to go back to the topic of Iran, because as both of you know, right now, the United States, Iran, and Pakistan are trying to put together another meeting in Islamabad. There were some hiccups, but the ceasefire was extended. isn't Europe completely out of this process right now? Isn't Europe sort of looking at this from the outside with no way to influence how things move forward, which is a dangerous situation when you're so dependent on the world's energy markets?
No, I think Europe is doing what it should do. When Cyprus were attacked by Hezbollah, immediately Greece led an European mission with France, with Italy, with Spain, with the Netherlands to defend Cyprus. We have now a coalition of the willing led by France and the United Kingdom to ensure in the future the freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, and all of us are very engaged in the diplomatic efforts to try to de-escalate the situation and to support our partners. Last week, for instance, with the support of Prime Minister Kyriakos and the Greek Air Force, I have the opportunity to visit Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and Qatar to talk directly with the leaders. We are permanently in the contact with the Prime Minister of Pakistan and supporting his efforts to mediate these conflicts and to try to convey the message to Iran and to our allies in the United States in order to achieve a permanent ceasefire and to give chance for diplomacy to address the deep issues on this conflict.
Wouldn't it be more important, though, for Europe to be actually sitting at the table? Because if we look at the first Islamabad talks, it was obviously the United States, Pakistan, and Iran, but then it was Russia, China, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Europe was not there, Mr. Prime Minister.
Well, let me first of all point out that our first priority was to ensure that we protect the territorial integrity of all our member states. And what happened in Cyprus was, I think, a litmus test for many member states. Essentially, we for the first time, experimented with operationalizing Article 42, Paragraph 7 of the European treaties, which is our mutual assistance collective clause. And many European countries, we were first for geographic and historical reasons.
The region, it's very close. I mean, this conflict is very close to the borders.
Supported Cyprus by sending, by making a military deployment. And what we want to do now, and this is certainly going to be a Greek priority, is to say, okay, if this were to happen again, how could we do it better? Because this would be a clear indication that we take our strategic autonomy seriously. Second, we're building and I think we've done a lot of work also under the leadership of António in terms of building, strategic partnerships with the Gulf countries. We've done so bilaterally. We have strategic partnership with these countries. We supported them in times of great difficulty, because we consider the Gulf countries to be very, very important in terms of our regional footprint as a European Union. But in terms of the negotiations themselves, although we share some of the goals of what happened, I mean, this was not Europe's war. Huh? So at the end of the day, the parties responsible for negotiating the end to the war need to be the parties that are actively involved. So we have to be realistic in terms of what we can and what we cannot do. But we're also ready to support and to participate in any initiative where we can add some real value. And again, on the question of navigation, for Greece, this was a priority at the Security Council. I chaired the Security Council months ago, because, and my topic was the freedom of navigation. I could not imagine at the time that this would be so relevant these days. But making sure that we have an active role to play when it comes to this issue, especially as Europe being, not just because of Greece, because of other countries, a global superpower when it comes to navigation. That's, for example, a topic where we could play a role. If there ever were to be a need for a multinational force to patrol a ceasefire, if this were necessary, we would be happy to do it. We did it in the Red Sea. Greece was leading Operation Aspides to protect maritime transport from Houthi attacks. If I want to be honest, am I happy with the overall participation of European countries? No, we could do more. And that's why we're also encouraging our European countries, if you want to take strategic autonomy seriously, this is not just about, the leadership of the Union, it's member states that commit the resources. If you can have 10 member states, for example, sending ships, it's different than having 3. So a lot of it also falls on our responsibilities. If we really want to be, at the table, we also have to, we have to walk the walk. We have to be present and demonstrate to all the actors in the region that we have value to add.
If you allow me to add one point, because in my visit to the Gulf, I understood that the Gulf states are really frustrated because when they were attacked, few people effectively sent equipment or people to protect them. But they are very grateful, for instance, to France or to Greece, because Greek, for instance, have military equipment in Saudi Arabia, and this military equipment was used to protect the Saudi Arabian facilities. And this is something that the Gulf states understand very well, and that this is one reason because they want to strengthen the relationship with the European Union, not only on the economics, but also on security and defense. Because we need to understand that now in this very uncertain world, we need to work more, we need to be more closer with like-minded partners and in reliable partners.
So, do I detect a criticism of the United States there? Because until now, these Gulf nations have basically relied on the US for their security.
No, I'm not talking about in the United States. It's not up to me. We have here 2 ambassadors of the United States. One to the ambassador to Greece, the ambassador to the European Union.
But if you say they're looking for new partners for
I'm just talking about Europe and what Europe is doing. Because it's, normally we listen too much times that Europe is out. No, we are present when and where we need to be present. And in this concrete situation, we didn't start this war. We didn't participate in this war. We was not informed about this war. But when this war came, we act to protect, first of all, our member states. Second, to be supportive with our allies and our partners in the Middle East and in the Gulf region. And you are engaged to try to control the dramatic side effects of this war. And we cannot underestimate the effects of this war.
If you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say that, again, this is a very complex situation. And of course, there's a conflict itself, but there are other areas where we can and we should be more involved. Lebanon. We need to support, and we've done so. We just, for example, sent another plane of humanitarian aid, and many other European countries have done so. We need to be very active in Lebanon. If we can, be active in brokering, a permanent peace between Lebanon and the United States, this will be to the benefit of the region. Gaza and the reconstruction of Gaza with, this is the position of Greece, but also of the European Union, the end point being a two-state solution. The protection of Christians in the broader region, and in Syria in particular, where we have quite a few reports of Christians being persecuted. So there are areas where we can be active. We have both the connections and the know-how to be possibly more effective. And we do this also, in cooperation with our US allies, because, in spite of, everything that's that's been, said, and in spite of the, whatever turbulence and bumps there may be down the road, I remain a believer in the transatlantic partnership. If you look at, the strategic challenges, from the east, we need to find a way to work together more effectively.
What sort of levers do European countries and does the EU actually have, though, to make a difference on the ground in the Middle East? If it's a situation in Gaza, if it's a situation in Lebanon, how much pressure can European countries, can the European Union actually apply to actually make a difference? Because, I mean, look, what's happening in Lebanon has been going on for a very long time. What's happening in Gaza has been going on for a very long time. And the situation in Iran, of course, is still not fully under control.
On Thursday, we have a meeting with all the European leaders, with President Aoun, with President Sisi, with President al-Shara, and the Crown Prince of Jordania, precisely to define how we can work together better. The European Commission have immediately approved very strong humanitarian support to Lebanon. 4 days after the war starts, President von der Leyen and myself, we met by VTC with all the leaders of the Gulf states and Middle East countries in order to work together with them, to support them by concrete measures.
And we can do it by being, we have to be practical, you know. Yeah. As much as I like these fascinating discussions.
Well, you can have both, right? You can have fascinating discussions and be practical afterwards.
You know, Lebanon needs humanitarian aid, and the Lebanese army needs equipment. Okay, so who can step up? It's just, we have to be very practical. We've done so, many other European countries have done so, but if we believe that we can be a geopolitical player by just you know, making nice statements from Brussels, this is not going to take us very far. In Egypt, for example, and I was a big proponent of highlighting how important Egypt is for Europe, we've made significant steps. We put money on the table. We manage the migration problem together. The same is true in Libya. We have a vital interest in stabilizing Libya and in ensuring that it's not subject to other foreign interference. We've done so. We are there, we're present, we try to support their coast guards. So this is about, I would say, hard realpolitik. Yeah. And we may not be where we want to be, but we are making, we have a commissioner now for the Mediterranean, we are making progress. And again, you should not forget that, you know, the European Union is, you know, it's a very unique creature. It's still, you know, you have the Commission and then you have 27 member states. And inevitably what will happen is that you will have more initiatives which can be labeled coalition of the willing. Because
so you think that model is something that is that has a future? Because I know there's a big discussion here, actually.
I think it's happening. I mean, let me come back to the Operation Aspides. You know, some countries will contribute, some countries will not contribute, and I think it's normal. Some countries may have, you know, a greater interest in doing so. So, when we cannot, I mean, Ukraine, which was an existential threat, we managed to come up with a European solution. I think we need to be proud of the fact that we stuck together. Because this was an existential threat for Europe as a whole. It would be great if we could get similar responses to other crises. But if that is not an option, then we need to find more ad hoc type solutions, the countries that are more willing, more eager, or have a greater interest simply because they may be in the region to contribute materially to these types of initiatives.
The Prime Minister could be a great co-anchor also, because you keep giving me the best segues to the next topic. Because both of you have said that Iran is not Europe's war, is not the war of European countries. President Trump has said, if European NATO partners say this is not their war, then Ukraine is not his war. How big is the threat of the Ukraine war, which is still going on full steam, it's still as brutal as ever, sort of falling by the wayside? Also, quite frankly, because of possible shortages in arms, with a lot of interceptors, for instance, being used in the really hot phase of the Iran war.
Look, unfortunately,
and I know Ukraine is a big topic for you. I know it's something that's...
No, but unfortunately, by geographical reasons, all the wars are European wars. Because we have a 360 degrees exposures. When Russia invade Ukraine, it is an existential threat for our security. When a war starts in the Middle East, it's become an existential threat for us, at least from the economic point of view. When someone threats the territorial integrity of one of our member states in Cyprus or in Denmark is a problem for us, is an existential threat for us, then all these wars are European wars, and we are engaged in all of them. But in this kind of situation, the best is to back to basics. The basics is principles, and the principle is uphold international law, support multilateral solutions, engage with partners, with the multipolar partnerships, and using our main capacity, it means trade, because Europe is, first of all, very important trade powerhouse, and we need to use this. We have already 80 trade agreements. We are ongoing in negotiating or approval on signing more 27. Just in the last few months, we concluded two important agreements with Mercosur and with India. And this is very important because we are a supplier of stability on trade. And this is very important to stabilize the global economy. And we need to provide stability to the global economy. And at the same time, we need to continue to engage with our neighbors, with our friends from the Western Balkans, with Ukraine, with Moldova, with those countries who want to enter in the European Union, and those countries who European Union wants to welcome. Then, this is what we are doing, and we need to continue to do this.
I wanted to stay in Ukraine for a second.
And at the same time, to invest in our two essential pillars: our own security and defense, because we need to rely on ourselves and our capability to defend ourselves, and second pillar, competitiveness, because we need to boost our capacity to increase our growth, to create better jobs, to ensure affordability for citizens, and then is to our three main pillars: competitiveness, security and defense, and Europe in the world.
What about Ukraine? Is Ukraine's support from the EU, especially after the elections in Hungary, is that something that's going to continue? Because now Europe is the main benefactor.
Well, we're happy that we're resolving the loan problem to Ukraine, hopefully, and we've delivered. We stepped up to the plate, financially and militarily. I mean, Greece has been supportive of Ukraine, in spite of the fact that this policy was not always very popular in Greece due to historical and cultural ties to Russia. But I was very clear in trying to explain to our people that we are a country that will always uphold international law, and that the violation of borders through the use of force can never be accepted. And if you look at our geography and our threats, I think you understand why this is a position of principle that needs to be defended at all costs. So we will continue to do what we have to do in Ukraine. And I'm sure that eventually the US will also do the same thing to reach a point where we can have a negotiated solution that will be not from a position of weakness when it comes to Ukraine. But I would like to very much support what Antonio said. We have two main priorities in Europe, and these are the topics that really preoccupy us at the European Council. Our competitiveness, we're falling behind, and that's why I've been calling for a pragmatic strategy that will balance our climate targets, our ambitious climate targets, with the need to protect our competitiveness and foster social cohesion, and of course supporting our defense industry and increase our defense spending. Remember, we had discussions years ago about having more fiscal space in terms of the European rules to spend more on defense. We did it. And that's why we can afford to do that, but we need to spend more on defense, but also build our own industry. For example, in Greece, we spend more than 3% on defense, and of course we partner with the US, we partner with Europe, but we need to develop a homegrown defense industry. And at a time when the shape of war is changing, we cannot rely on expensive interceptors to shoot down $20,000 drones. And there is so much dynamism in Europe. I've seen amazing companies in Portugal, for example. We need to bring all these startups together. We need to change our procurement method and thinking in our ministries of defense. When we talk to our generals, they still think big ships, big platforms, big planes, expensive. And I said, okay, but
how important is cooperation with Ukraine on that topic? Because I know that I think Greece has developed unmanned boats together with the
this is,
Ukrainians.
an example
the Germans are developing drones. The
cooperation
Portuguese are developing drones.
We're looking into, and I think it's only fair. I mean, we've supported Ukraine, and I think it's only fair that Ukraine would share some of its technology, and it is cutting-edge technology with us and with the European partners that are willing to invest. It's not easy, and again, one of the reasons why it's not easy is because the mindset has been different. So, for example, we set up a special nimble authority within our Ministry of Defense that does only innovative things. That does, puts out RFPs, asks our startups to come up with products, tests them in real case scenario. We have an anti-drone system that we put on our frigates that shot down drones, Houthi drones, in the Red Sea. We developed it, our own. I mean, it works. We'll commercialize it, and if we can sell it to other countries...
it's quite surprising how the procurement process for that has really been turbocharged also by the necessity to bring those things to the battlefield quickly.
Yes, but it has to be, a dual-purpose track. On the one hand, we need, the big platforms, and we need to be able to cooperate. I've been following with concern, we discussed it at the European Council, the fact that Germany and France cannot agree on a joint sixth-generation fighter. I mean, sorry, but we cannot afford in Europe to have two different planes. We can't. So no matter, and I'm glad that they gave themselves more time. We need to we need to find a solution. Egos need to be put aside, because this is always, a problem. And we need to understand that when it comes to at least some of the really big systems, we cannot afford to have, a procurement that's broken down along national lines. We need to change our merger rules. We need more scale. So on the one hand, you need more scale for the big players. Can we create an Airbus today with our competition rules? I doubt it, but Airbus has been a stunning success. Probably the most successful example of European cooperation, of a competitive product that has taken over the whole world. We need to do this for some of the big platforms, and at the same time, give space to this amazing sort of ecosystem of startups and come up with nimble solutions that we can commercialize, and be aware that the landscape is changing all the time. In what may be relevant today, maybe now in 6 months may not be relevant.
For this competitiveness, wouldn't it be important to also speed up the ascension of the West Balkan states into the European Union?
Yes, I think...
Just to have a big bloc here, a powerful bloc.
Look, for sure, the enlargement of the single market, it's a very important...
I see Prime Minister Edi Rama. There's not many people I'm afraid of, but he's definitely one of them.
No, the enlargement to the Western Balkans is not only about economy, it's also about geopolitics. And today we gave a very important step, approving the Working Party Group to start drafting the Treaty of Accession to Montenegro. It's the first one since 20,000, from several years. And we will have the 5th of June, the next summit between the European Union and the Western Balkans, and I presume and I hope that it will be a good opportunity to continue to work together. It's clear that Montenegro are working very well. Albania is working very well. I hope that we could solve other problems with other countries, but the accession process is always a difficult one. But they are doing a very good job. And I think the most important is we have the common political willing to conclude as soon as possible this enlargement process. And I think we are now on track. and we need to continue to do our work.
Is this striving for more European competitiveness also important because the Trump administration essentially sees Europe more as a competitor than as an ally, especially as far as trade is concerned, when we look at, for instance, at the tariffs on a lot of the industries in Europe?
I do believe that eventually we have more to gain by strengthening our trade ties with the United States. And of course, we have established now a balance, but at the end of the day, we all need to be concerned about what's happening in China. And it's China right now that is, the export powerhouse that's flooding the world with very, very cheap products, and that is threatening our industry. So I would argue that we still have much more in common in terms of thinking as, in the context of a transatlantic bloc that will, however, recalibrate the role of Europe. I mean, how can we argue that we can be an important partner, for example, in NATO if we don't increase our defense spending? We need to step up to the plate in defense and competitiveness, what we discussed. This will inevitably make the relationship with the US more balanced. But I do fundamentally believe that the interests of Europe and the US in terms of what's happening in the rest of the world will not exclude competition, because there are still areas where we will, of course, always compete, but we are a huge market. The US is a huge market. Again, I would stress what Antonio said. We are believers in free trade. We think that trade is good. And I'm also speaking, representing a maritime nation. 90% of global trade is through ships. And shipping has demonstrated how critical it is for our well-being. So we also have a national interest in free trade, because this is a very important industry. And I think that this relationship can find a new equilibrium. But I'd be happy if this new equilibrium is a result of a Europe that's stronger and that takes, really delivers in terms of competitiveness and in terms of defense. Because, look, President Trump has his own way of making his points. Was he right when he said that Europe was not spending enough on defense? Absolutely. He was right. Did he push us to spend more? He did, in his own way. Ukraine, of course, also contributed. So the relationship is going to be more balanced. NATO is going to be more balanced if we spend more. And if we develop more European projects, this is not a competition to NATO. This is good for NATO, eventually. So European strategic autonomy, if we deliver more results, if we streamline our procurement, for example, I'll be welcoming President Macron to Athens in a couple of days. We're signing the extension of our strategic partnerships. But I'll give you a practical example. We bought the same ships with the French. Exactly, more or less the same ships. This is good. This is interoperability. This is, we contributed also. We want to be a bigger part of the production process. But this is essentially, it was safe before safe. In 2021, we said we're going to build the same ships, more or less. And, of course, we're going to pay the same price with the French. So these are the sort of initiatives that we need. And inevitably, if this happens, it will result in a more balanced relationship with the US.
But isn't it still the case that with the new economy, with artificial intelligence, with new devices and everything, right now there's a big run on natural resources, on rare earths, on the likes. If we think, let's say, I don't know when the Ukraine war is going to end, but the US has already made clear that they want trade relations with Russia. They want good trade relations with Russia, and a lot of that has to do with raw commodities. If you trust some of the things that Vladimir Putin has said about his meeting with President Trump in Alaska, he said one of the things that they were sort of talking about was liquefied natural gas production in the Arctic. It seems like a lot of the stuff that the Germans were doing with the Russians before the war started. Isn't there going to be a competition between the US and Europe for these commodities that you need for the new economy? And what's Europe going to do when the US starts doing business with Russia again? Look, full scale.
For Europe remains a priority to remain a good relation with the United States as an ally, as a partner, as a friend. Sometimes we doesn't agree. We don't agree in the same issues. We don't have now clearly the same vision about the importance to preserve a multilateral system. We don't have now the same vision about the importance to uphold the international law. We have some different approach about our relationship with Russia or with China. But in spite of this, first of all, we try to de-escalate the tensions. The member states invest a lot to agree with the United States in NATO in the fair burden share of military expenditure in NATO. We invest a lot to negotiate a trade agreement to the United States to stabilize and give predictability to our companies to invest and to export to the United States. And if you look back 1 year ago, everybody said with President Trump, President will give up on Ukraine. But so far, the United States remain engaged, and President Trump remained personally engaged in trying to mediate this conflict. It's true, now the United States is not contributing anymore to support financially Ukraine, but Europe proves that we have capacity to support Ukraine, not only last year, but with the loan that we will finally approve tomorrow, we can support Ukraine 2026 and next year. And we'll continue, because we will support as long as necessary and whatever it takes. Then, I understand that for a journalist is a temptation to try to find and to create tensions between Europe and the United States. We have our own style. We respect the style of the United States. But our main goal is to de-escalate, to avoid tensions, to don't react to each tweet with the other tweet, and we keep calm and we will continue. Because this is a long story, common story, and this will be a long story ahead of us.
But even if you think it's sensationalizing, there is very serious implications, or there could be very serious implications, because right now you have two of the main raw commodity providers in the world that are engaged in wars and under heavy sanctions, one of them being Russia, one of them being Iran. The United States is talking to Iran through mediators. The United States is talking to Russia through mediators. The Europeans so far have talked, you've spoken to, I think, Masoud Pezeshkian, the president of Iran. Putin, no one's really speaking to him. What happens when the United States brokers an end to the war in Ukraine, and the United States brokers an end to the war in Iran, and there's sanctions relief, these markets open up, the United States will be in prime position for all of these raw commodities, and Europe will be the loser, won't it? It's a serious question, isn't it? Because you need all these raw materials. If you want this competitiveness of the European Union and of your industries here, it's quite important, these things.
Look, if the United States decided to change their alliance from Europe to Russia, it will be a big challenge.
I don't know, it's not about changing the alliance.
But I think this is not the official position of the United States. But you can use the opportunity to have here two ambassadors of the United States that can answer better than me what is the official policy of the United States. I just can answer on behalf of the European Union. And from our side, we remain committed to ensure the best relation as possible with the United States. On trade, on security, on defense, everywhere, and the different matters. And we will continue. This is our policy. But of course, we need also to protect our interest. When the United States say that they want to take over of a part of the territory of one of our member states, of course, we need to react and say, sorry, we need to preserve the territorial integrity of our member states. That's clear, that's understandable. And the United States need to understand this. When the United States decided today I will increase the tariffs by 50%. Lucy, look, it's not fair. We have an agreement. We have agreed. Then you need to respect the agreement. This is our way to manage this relationship with the United States. But we will keep calm. And to continue to manage this.
No, it's important to keep calm, but it is also important to secure that the European companies, European enterprises have the raw commodities that they need for the products of the future. And if you look at the world right now, if you look at, for instance, a lot of the rare minerals in Central Africa, the Russians are obviously very active there. You look at Russia, which is obviously also very important, and you look at Iran, which is very important for the world's hydrocarbons, then that must be a concern to get European companies, European enterprises, what they need to be able to succeed at a decent price, and not be reliant on countries like China, for instance, for a lot of these.
I think the Chinese stranglehold on rare earth is a problem for everyone, not just for Europe. It's also a problem for the United States. I guess we have an interest in ensuring that we sort of, to a certain extent, break these dependencies, but we also need to understand and take a sectoral approach and look at industries where we can still afford to be competitive, and there are quite a few of those, and industries where China has an insurmountable advantage, where it probably doesn't make sense to invest that much. But when it comes to your question regarding natural gas, I mean, the real question is, do we want to recreate dependencies on actors who have proven to be completely unreliable? I mean, you mentioned the German story. Of course, Germany was very reliant on very cheap natural gas, and look how this turned out. Yeah. So I don't think there's an appetite in Europe right now, frankly, even if the war were to be, and hopefully we hope for the war to be resolved, to recreate these energy dependencies with Russia. And plus, I thought that the US was very eager to sell us natural gas. So
they are definitely very eager.
There are other suppliers. And of course, we are also in Greece looking for our own natural gas. We will have a first well that's going to be drilled in Greece in more than 40 years, but with cooperation with Exxon and Greek companies. So let's not forget that at some point we also have rare earths and critical materials. And again, in the spirit of not being so sort of ideological, we need to balance the protection of the environment with the need to access critical components. Some of them may be present in Europe that we will eventually need. And certainly, if Greece were to discover natural gas, it would be good for Greece, obviously. It would also be good for Europe.
That's all we have time for, unfortunately. I think we could keep going for several hours. I want to thank all of you. I know it's been a very long day. Thank you to both of you for the great discussion. And I hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.